Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Everstage's Go-to-Master Show, Season 3, where we converse with RevOps and go-to-market leaders from some of the most successful companies today and learn from their unique stories. I am your host, Jose Aleman, and joining us today is Juan Felipe Mejia, Senior Director, Global Sales Compensation and Operations at UiPath. Thank you for being here, Juan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity to join this podcast. I'm super excited about sharing a little bit about myself with everybody. Personally speaking, born in Colombia, I've been in the States for about 20-something years. I've been in the overall space of revenue ops operations and compensation for roughly 20 years. That is even accounting. Anything that I did prior, focusing more in this area of expertise. I had the pleasure to work with a lot of bright minds throughout my career. That's people that actually came from different organizations, big names, Google, Microsoft, SAP, a lot of big companies, for lack of a story short. Through my career, I've been always focused on making sure that I understand what the market delivers and how to actually can leverage that to the best of my abilities for professional and career development and growth. So I'm super excited to be here, share a little bit about best practices, some of the things that I have done and some of the things that I haven't done and, haven't really think about. But thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. It's funny, we have a similar personal trajectory. I was born in Mexico, and I moved to Canada 27 years ago now. So similar path, and also was drawn into the operations field very early. So like-minded, this should be fun. Excellent. So obviously, fascinating trajectory, moving from accounting to sales comp, revenue operations, multiple industries. It seems like you've seen a lot of different scenarios, how different companies work, a lot of the good and the bad and the ugly, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But tell me a little bit about how were you drawn into comp specifically from
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
general
So I
operations
was
field,
drawn
just
to
narrowing it
sales
down into
com
sales
because in
compensation?
my perspective, you are kind of like blending a lot of areas, right? You blend finance and strategy and to a degree psychology. Interested enough, we, had the opportunity to participate out of I wouldn't say a podcast, but something similar at what they call Think Tag for a company. And we had the opportunity, an FBI agent to actually join and kind of like it ties back everything what it is like how people think and how do people react to specific scenarios and behaviors and kind of like presets your mind in terms of like what comes next. So for me it was it was a lot about like influence and behavior through numbers. And that's basically what, caught my eye in terms of like, being drawn to this specific area. And I do think what gets me very passionate about is about this particular function is the constant evolution, right? So every year you have to bring new goals, new products, market conditions that, require you to think about how you motivate and reward for performance. So I do think it's something that keeps you going. There's never a dull moment. And you always have to rethink how to do things differently on a day to day. Given the fact that I worked in multiple industries, I never looked at an issue with the same lens, right? I always have a little bit of like perspective of how to broadcast in a banking or tech or SaaS or global publishing will do things. So I do think that has actually helped me through my career to just rethink process and do things, thinking always outside the box.
Excellent. Yeah, I think I like the angle of the psychology and comp. It combines all the analytics and the data-driven and process things that operations people care about, but has this added dimension of really it's about influencing behaviors and it's about people and about people's paychecks, which obviously we care a lot about. So it really it's where the rubber meets the road and everything comes together. So there's a lot of opportunity to make a big impact. So that's super interesting. I'm not going to ask you to pick your favorite industry. I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe offline you can tell me what you've enjoyed the most about different industries. Um, but I wanted to get into some more of your path here because we know you've led a lot of significant transformations at UiPath. You've worked on IPO readiness, which is obviously super interesting for a lot of people in companies that are at that stage, optimizing sales structures. Can you tell us some of the challenges you've had in specifically designing comp plans for a global team and balancing fairness, motivation, business objectives, especially in these uncertain
Absolutely.
times?
I do
Anything you
think,
could
I
share
mean,
would be
you
super
kind of
helpful
already
for our
answered the
listeners.
question to a degree. I think that the main challenge is basically aligning the diverse market dynamics and unifying to a strategy, right? When you're talking about a comp design, you're basically is the tail end of everything that you do in an organization. It's basically, how you're tying back the strategy and how you're driving those particular behaviors, outcome results for the organization, right? So you need to make sure that you are getting everybody on the same page, and everybody on the same page is all your key stakeholders, right? CFO or CEO, Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Business Officer, Chief People Officer, because at the end of the day, all of them have a specific goal mindset to kind of like deliver outcome. And you just have to make sure that you're bridging the gap and kind of like get them to work together in terms of coming up to a unified strategy, right? Um, you have to tailor plans to regional realities, right? While maintaining global consistency, right? So, because if you don't do that, there has to be some guardrails in terms of what you're going to be doing as a global organization. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a comp plan per person and customizing a little bit more than you would like to do, right? So for me is focus on transparency. Simple at a first glance is basically something you always have to keep in mind where you're doing. As a matter of fact, through most of my presentations when I'm doing like anything to C-level, I have a famous quote that from Leonardo da Vinci that says, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." For me, is I just keep things as simple. If you can explain things, in a napkin or kind of like just simplify things, the conversation for everybody, I think people should really focus in on selling and figure out how the compliance structure should work, right? And I think also as part of that is like ensuring you have data that ensures that the plans are fair and realistic, that drive the right behaviors and support your business outcomes, right? Otherwise, it's like you're setting, unrealistic expectations, and then you might end up in a situation where you have to do an ongoing replanning to readjust people and basically avoid the conversation of attrition, right? Because if you preset level some unrealistic expectations, sellers are going to react to it, and it's going to cost you more to go and hire new people than actually retain the people that you have on board because you're setting incorrect expectations to what the company wants to deliver throughout the course of the fiscal.
That makes sense. You probably have found yourself in situations where people want to add a lot more into the plan that should be there just because there are obviously many aspects to any corporate strategy, but not everything needs to be in the plan to be something that we drive for. So I like that quote as a north star to keep the team aligned. That it not because it's a good idea, it doesn't mean it has to be in the plan. There are other ways to drive behavior as well, and keeping plans simple is obviously a big value. What about a similar topic? Plans need to be simple, transparent, easy to understand, support the strategy, but more and more efficient. We need to make sure that the dollars we're allocating to comp are well spent, that we can prove they're well spent. I'm interested in your take on this. How do you approach this problem? And especially again in this uncertain economic conditions where everyone is asking for
Yeah,
more,
absolutely. I think it's
how do
all
you manage
about,
this, and what can you share
we
about this
start with
problem?
a scenario building, right? And you build flexibility into your models, right? At the end of the day, you have to have a strategy and you have to keep what is your primary metric? What are your strategic levers? Where do we want to spend those dollars, right? But you have to make sure that you design a comp plan that aligns to basically what we want to deliver, right? And often enough, companies have the tendency to do things the other way around, which is like they go in design mode and they create these like elaborate comp plans where are like so expensive by the time they get to cost modeling. Is like we can afford what we launch, right? So it's having a pre-level set understanding of how much you want to spend and having flexibility in terms of like what are the key strategic levers that you're utilizing is something that actually has worked for us. I think at the end of the day, and certain times, you have to prioritize your return on investment, right? You have to ensure every com dollar it ties to measurable outcomes, right? That actually enables you to make the right decisions through the right data. But also, you have to have something that is crucial. I think often enough companies jump into, yes, it's all about dollars, prioritizing return on investment, but they forgot about protecting the morale for the employee and ensuring that they have achievable targets and timely communication, right? Like I understand, listen, we'll run businesses. We are part of the stakeholders. We want to make sure that we deliver the right outcomes and everything, but you have to have an employee that is engaged and happy to actually be part of the company, right? And I think that's all tied together into some of the key principles that I alluded, which is something that is simple to a degree. Try to keep things, don't try to do too many things at once. Make sure that you have clear alignment between your roles and responsibilities, because you need to understand if you have someone that's focusing on growth and expansion, that person might not necessarily be able to focus on growth and expansion, retention, churn, down sell, and also consumption, right? So you need to make sure that there's close alignment in terms of what you want them to do and how that actually translate into actual deployable targets and the ability for them to deliver results against that. Because in today's macroeconomic, sellers are going to look at, what I can deliver, how much are you paying me for every dollar? Is it easy? Is the product? Is the alignment of the company? So all those factors play an overall key contributor in terms of like, approaching some, to a degree, uncertain economic factors.
Yeah, that resonates a ton. The importance of the simulations and just running some scenarios is pretty key, especially now where I think most companies are finding that you're broadening our range of possible futures given everything that's happening. Curious if you have any tips or tricks around scenario modeling. Do you use any tools for that, or you just have massive Excel spreadsheets where you load historical data? I mean, I know
So
there's
there's
many
different tools,
ways to
right? Every
handle this, but
company
just curious
utilizes
how you handle it.
different tools to kind of like do some of the planning, right? Tools that I know without actually doing a promo for companies is basically Salesforce have excellent tools. Exactly has excellent tools. There's other companies out there that are much more, smaller in scale. As a matter of fact, we just recently went through a process of evaluating, because we're doing everything in Excel. Like, how do we do our quota planning? How are we going to actually translate that into a, carving out a territory, segmentation, and everything else. We finally selected a tool. Now, going back to your original question, is like, what are the tricks that we use? We use a financial modeling called Monte Carlo. I think most professionals are familiarized with it. So it's just basically what it does. It projects different outcomes of scenarios in terms of intervals of attainment, and therefore a total value of payout based on the projected historical data and what we actually want to see tomorrow. You could do that in Excel. Excel is a very flexible tool, or there's actually companies that have the ability to incorporate Monte Carlo into a little bit more of a dashboard based approach. And that's what we're heading towards in the future, moving a little bit more of less of the Excel and moving to like more of those tools that actually have the ability to what if a scenario and more of a fingertips without having to build these robust models that takes hours to actually, update.
Yeah, totally. I think things like Monte Carlo used to be a bit of a luxury. Now they're becoming the norm, right? You just really have to go that deep, and yeah, having some tools definitely help. Just to call back to your comment, obviously quota setting, planning, it's really all connected, right? So to the extent where comp is connected to those things, capacity planning, quota, understanding, attrition, massively important. So definitely understand the importance of that. We're actually launch a new module at every stage that helps companies do that. I'm pretty excited about the possibility for exactly the reasons you mentioned. So that's really cool to hear. Um, your case is especially interesting for us because not only you're a comp professional that's been around, has done everything, worked in different industries, you also happen to work for a company now, UiPath, that is really innovative, all about automation, at the forefront of AI, and really just very technologically driven. So curious to see if that makes your day to day more just leaning more towards automation. If you have examples where automation has significantly
Yeah,
improved
absolutely.
efficiency or
I think
accuracy
this
in your
is
sales comp
someone
process.
from one of my former managers. She was always a firm believer about drinking your own champagne, right? So, in simple terms, is like we come to mind to automation first, right? So, what are the things that you can do on a day to day that could make your day a little bit better, right? So, some examples are automation of a split tagging in Salesforce. Depends on whether you have an automated tool that assigns, splits to an opportunity to make sure that you drive a little bit more accuracy in your payouts. Um, we automated quota to payout workflows through basically AI, and we integrated dashboards that reduce manual effort by over, I'll probably say somewhere around 40 to 50%, and eliminates errors, right? And I do think what it does is I give the reps the ability to have visibility into their overall attainment and earnings, and dramatically improving their trust and efficiency, right? So a lot of these factors, when I talk to my team, and this is something that I always tell them, think about what are the things that you can always do in an automation that will free out your day to day to make sure that we focus our time into more of the analytical pieces that actually do add value to the day to day. So from my perspective, is like it's not necessarily with the intent of like replacing people with automations, but more with the intent to make sure what the humans are here to do what we do, which is basically think through an issue and provide practical solutions that we can apply to the business and are deployable to the field and to the organization overall.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, automation already plays a big role. We're starting to see AI help out a bunch of processes. And echoing your sentiment here, it's about freeing humans to do what humans are still best at for a little bit longer, which is a creative thinking process and generated actual insights that are harder to find from just the data. But obviously, AI is accelerating incredibly rapidly. We're seeing a lot of interesting things come out. Without putting you on the spot to forecast what could happen, but any ideas of where you think the AI could continue overlapping with sales comp in particular? What are the things you might expect to see, or any areas where
I do
you
think
expect AI to
it's
have the
all
biggest
about
impact in comp
predictive
specifically?
modeling, right? And what that means in simple terms is help with data upstream into models, right? Real-time plan optimization, right? So our COM tool is basically now going to be rolling out something for agentic AI, where basically you're going to be able to just say, hey, I want to build this role. And basically the agent is just going to be able to help you with some of the role building in the back end at fingertips, right? So I do think that, a lot of this tech is going to help with that, predictive modeling, the plan optimization on a real time, personalized incentives, at your fingertips in situations where you basically do require it. And I do think, when I think big picture, I would probably say the biggest impact is going to be in planning, performance, and forecasting, right? Because you are going to be able through, I guess, to quantitative driven agents, you will be able to detect what are the inefficiencies, like what is it that is not effective and therefore becomes costly without having to become costly, right? So I think it's like all about that, right? If you're able to predict in real time a little bit of that cost, and you have tools that are helping you get those models in place, you're able to eliminate anything that is not necessarily affected into your overall compensation.
Yeah. So I'm envisioning tools that could be looking at what is actually happening in the field, comparing it with the set of objectives we had at the beginning of the year when we set out our plans, and just spot things maybe before they become big problems, and help com professionals identify trends, raise flags, or really understand also what might be working really well and we need to do more of, right? That's the other angle. It's not all doom and gloom, but just we have a specific spiff that's really hitting. If we can identify that earlier, that is amazing. And forecasting, totally. And I'm even sure modeling is going to get a lot easier. There's the build it yourself in Excel. There's specific tools, but some of these models are getting smart enough to build out with very little effort some custom stuff that is suited for our environments. That can really be a bit of a game changer. So if not everyone is happy programming Monte Carlo spreadsheets, but some of these AI tools can already do some of that. So that's fascinating to see. We're
For
in for
sure.
a interesting few years of industry change across the board. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. We have a couple questions we always ask our guests just to wrap things up. I'm conscious of your time. We don't want to keep you here forever. But really, first one is just if there are any specific resources, books, podcasts, any resources that you rely on that you would recommend for someone that's starting out or RevOps or looking to
Yeah,
scale their
absolutely.
career, or
A
just
bunch
good
of
stuff you
stuff, like
recommend
a couple
for
things
anyone.
that come to mind. So in terms of book, we have something that I read. It's called The Quality Sales Leader uh, by John McCahan. It's basically a great understanding of how sales and rev apps, intersect one with another. Another one, I think it's called Measure What Matters by John Doyer. It's mastering OKRs and aligning, ops with a strategy. I think you're looking for it. And podcast, there's a couple of stuff. I mean, clearly you guys, you guys doing an amazing work. The revenue engine, I think, is a features top revenue ops leaders and actionable insights. Upstart podcast, drive into the real world ops challenges and solution. Communities, we have the Rev Genius and We Serve for Ops. Fantastic for networking and sharing best practices. I think that's some of the things that come to mind. And then one that I recently joined from Forma AI, which is called the Think Tank, and is basically a network of over 80 professionals who are basically in this space where we're meeting about discussing best business practices and bounce ideas from each other, right? I'm a firm believer that I don't have the answers for everything. And I think networking with other peers and kind of like looking at through their lens to see how they actually are handling some of the issues, that do helps, right? And it also just for networking and just bouncing ideas from each other. So those are some things that come to mind.
Excellent. Thanks. Last question, and I think you've given us one already, which is 3 key pieces of advice you'd like to share with our listeners who aspire to excel in their careers. I guess I'm stealing one you've given us already, which is network, learn from your peers, get out there, connect. Um,
Yeah, I think
Definitely
for me, what
echoing that as a
actually
big
has been,
one.
I'm very
Anything else you want
inquisitive,
to add
right?
on
So
that
you
front?
always have to be curious and analytical. What that means is like you always have to understand the why behind the data, why behind the processes. And you have to learn how to tell stories with numbers, right? I also do think that we often enough jump into uh, the habit or jumping into resolution mode without understanding the why, right? So interesting enough, last week we had a Harvard professor here. She did a little bit of a kind of like, here's the guiding principles in terms of how do I address everything. And, she kind of like touched based on a lot of what I'm saying, which is basically don't jump into resolution right away. Understand the why and what you're trying to solve before you actually go into trying to fix the issue, right? Uh, for me, what has helped me in my career is building cross-functional relationships, right? In rare ups, you see it in a position where basically you have the ability to intertwine and basically work with a lot of professionals in different areas of your company, but you also have the ability to influence, others and basically build that level of trust and alignment with what you do. So, and I think you touched on the first one, which is basically networking. I would probably say, also focus on tools, tech, what are the focus of your outcomes, understand what you have available to you, never lose sight of what, drives revenue and efficiency. And if you have those guiding principles into your overall day to day, I feel that you are going to position yourself in a place where you have a better handling of what your day to day could look like.
Yeah, those definitely make sense. So stay curious, go after the why. Don't jump into resolution mode immediately. Um, Leverage technology and just lifelong learning. Really stay on it and stay relevant. One thing I tell people that are starting out on the path and are looking for progression as well is ops in general and comp even more. It's one of the few functions that is not siloed in the company. Like we get to see everything, right? So that is a really privileged position to understand how the business works.
For sure.
Um, or a big miss if you don't understand how the business works. And if you do, just to have an opinion, to show up, and that usually helps get people seats at the table for whatever that next thing might be. Um, so yeah, it's a great career path. Seems like you're killing it. So congrats on that, and it's really great to hear from professionals that are doing well in the field and willing to share.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the invite. And this has been a good experience. I definitely recommend it out there. If you have the opportunity to connect with you guys, for sure, do it.
Thanks again. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this insightful episode of Go to Masters. I want to thanks Juan again for sharing his experiences and valuable insights. And remember, you can tune in every week to learn more from game changers driving hypergrowth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales compensation. I'm Jose Aleman, your host, signing off.